I print out a preprint, is it still a preprint? Yes, because preprint refers to pre-peer review. So let me explain. Traditionally, if a scientist wants to share their findings with the world, they'll submit it to a journal, and that journal will then review the article in a peer review process. And so basically, what this involves is that you send a draft of your paper to the journal. The editor takes a quick look at it. If they think it might be worth publishing in their journal, then they'll pass it on to peer reviewers. So those are fellow scientists in the field who should be able to critically evaluate the paper and know if it's, because they're in the field, they should know if there are like any big holes or there's any thing that they're not mentioning, or there's further experiments that need to be done to really solidify the findings. And then they'll either say, okay, this is good to go, this is not right for this journal, or this is probably good for this journal, but we need them to clarify a couple things or do a couple extra experiments to show X or Z or whatever. And then they tell that to the editor, and then the editor makes a decision. And so often what they'll do is they'll send the paper back to the scientist and say, okay, do these experiments, and then if it all works out, we'll publish the paper. And so this is supposed to make sure that everything is really great quality. It's not a perfect process. There are a lot of downsides. There's also it. So sometimes they can miss things. Sometimes they reject papers that are really good for reasons that aren't totally to do with the science. And there's things like predatory journals that'll publish basically anything and still be considered quote unquote peer reviewed. So it's not perfect, but it gives a layer of like legitimacy to a paper. Like, okay, this is something that's been reviewed by other scientists and it's potentially worthy of your time reading it and taking the findings kind of at face value. You always want to read critically, of course. Problem is that this can take months and months, essentially even years. And so often scientists want to get their results out quicker. So this can be important like in things like a pandemic, but it can also be really important just all the time. And so it's like you're doing science is like this giant puzzle, and the puzzle piece might be found by a group in one country, and then a group in another country is trying to do the puzzle and they don't have access to that puzzle piece. But that other group does. And so if that other group can like share that puzzle piece quicker, then the group over here can then fill out the puzzle quicker. So with a peer review process, it's kind of like making sure that the right puzzle piece has all the right edges and everything before it gets shared. But with a preprint, it's kind of like just the scientist saying, okay, this is what we think the puzzle piece is. It might not be perfect, but we say the puzzle piece is this. And then the other group can say, okay, this does seem like the right puzzle piece, or based on what we know, there's something fishy about this puzzle piece. And then, but either way, they have that information that they can then evaluate and use if it's helpful. So that's the basic idea with the preprint, is that you bypass that peer review process, at least for the time, and just get the results out there on a preprint server like bioRxiv. And so often scientists will submit to the bioRxiv at the same time that they're submitting to the actual journal. And so the paper will eventually get published, and there'll be, you can then see on the bioRxiv or whatever, a link to the published paper. So when we're talking about biochemistry, typically the papers are published on bioRxiv. There's also medRxiv and chemarchive and archive, which is the physics original starter thing of it all. And so it's had a real uptick with the pandemic, which has been really great in terms of getting information out quickly that needs to be gotten out quickly, but it's also been bad because it's introduce some bad or misleading papers that the media picks up and causes a bunch of problems. But often the preprints get a sort of unofficial peer review on Twitter, where scientists will review the papers, and these can make it really understandable to see what's going on. And it's often, in addition to just like being critical about science paper, it can also be really good for good science papers. And so often scientists will actually give like a Twitter thread of sharing the key findings of their own papers. And so of course you need to be critical when you're looking at anything in a journal or on Twitter. But these like quick digests can make it really easy to understand what's going on. And more importantly, they allow you to actually communicate with the scientists who did the studies and ask questions about things that you might be confused about. And this has been the case with a recent paper that I'm looking at that's really great. But I was kind of confused about a couple of things. And so I got in touch with the first author. So it's the lead author in the study, and he's been helping answer my questions, and it's really great. And so it really is this great resource for trainees that I think a lot more people should use if they don't know about it. With open access, they're different things. So preprints are often open access, but not all open access papers are preprints. And so open access means that it's freely accessible to anyone. And so this is like padlock symbol signifies that something is open access. And you can also download this free tool called Paywall, and it has this browser extension. And so when you're on a page, it'll show you if it's open access or not. And if it's open access, you'll get this green symbol, and if you click on it, you'll be able to find the free version. And so this is sending you to free but legal sources for the article. If that still doesn't work for you, or if you get a gray symbol, you can try getting it through your library. So libraries often have these things called interlibrary loan, or ILL. So the library can like get it from other libraries. You can also try emailing the authors and or asking on Twitter if someone has a PDF of it that they'll share with you. A few other browser extensions that can be really helpful when you're reading scientific papers. So we talked about Paywall, but there's also, so if you want to check out like the quality of an article, there's this thing called PubPeer. So PubPeer is the site that people can like comment on papers. And it's set up to be like neutralish, so basically you can like people can post, I mean it's not like just for criticism, but it tends to mostly be for criticism. And often what happens is people will be pointing out things about the article that look kind of fishy. So you often find like people pointing out examples of what look to be like duplicated figures or lanes from figures, and it'll often, sometimes it can actually lead to like the paper being retracted. And so if a paper is retracted, you'll see that you'll get like a red, like this paper has been retracted type of signal. And even if there's just comments, you'll get if you have this extension downloaded, you'll get like a bar telling you that the paper has comments on PubPeer, and then you can click on that and see the comments. Another tool I really like is Cite. And so it has a free browser extension as well as like a paid version. And if you click on it, it'll show you like where the paper has been cited and in what context. So if it's been like in a positive context, it'll be, that's like the green check. In a neutral, it's just like mentioned, it's that gray thing. And then if it's being questioned or like contrasted, then it has like that blue question mark. So that can be really helpful if you're trying to like figure out whether an article has been reproduced, or what's like any sort of follow-up from that paper, or whether there's been papers contradicting it, or that sort of thing. So that can really help you too when you're trying to evaluate the quality of a paper.